8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That is a reading of the Second Amendment, and thus begins this episode of Tall Tales here on Monday. It is a brand new week, a brand new awesome week to celebrate all things Tall Tales, because we have a lot of good stuff to talk about. But first, I want to introduce myself. Jose Martinez, your host. In the production booth is Daryl Taggarty, joining us, pushing buttons and answering your phone calls. Good afternoon, Daryl.
Good afternoon, Jose.
That phone call they can dial to call you, Daryl, is 671-888-8255. And that is how we're going to start today. We don't have a Jemmy Cutney, unfortunately, but I do have a... let's just go to the card today. I'm searching for us here on our social media. We are live streaming on Facebook, and we're also streaming on YouTube.com, as well as our own website, the official website of this radio station, thepoint.gu. On the card today, and we have a truncated, is that how we would say it?
There's so many ways to put it.
a shortened show, but nevertheless, it's still exciting things happening today. Tall Tales is going to allow the last hour Tall Tales to begin a 2-hour special episode of Veterans with Benefits. I'll tell a little bit more of what's coming up as the hour proceeds. But right now on our card today, systemic racism. That's the part where we speak truth versus the narrative. This one is Freeman versus Black History Month. But wait, wasn't that in February? Public Law 3634, there are a number of violations of this, of the open government law, and we're going to get just a little bit of it to point it out. James Moylan versus reality. We'll get to why the delegate of Guam to the United States Congress may be well in over his head. Maneka versus Israel. There is an article that came out last week. I went to a protest and I was surrounded by a mob. It's a first-hand account of a reporter that went into the a free Palestine support, a kind of a support Hamas protest right after the hostages were freed by IDF soldiers, the IDF, last week. Then we have SCOTUS versus 45. It's kind of a Second Amendment piece, but more so, I think it belongs down here in the card. Doug versus SCOG. I'm not sure if SCOG is the correct way to call the Supreme Court of Guam. I'm sure there's a different name. I mean, I just took it from SCOTUS. They're not the Supreme Court of the United States. Perez versus Duenas Part 2. It's an alternate take, and I think it's a very important take as well. And then Biden's EPA versus border security. We have Europe versus socialism, European voters versus the Green Movement. It's very, very strongly tied together. And then Spain, Norway, Ireland versus Christians, and Alito versus the abortionists. Systemic racism. I hope everybody or some people were able to make it down to Jeff's Pirates Cove this weekend, especially for the buffet on Father's Day. Here, if you look at your screen, for those who are viewing the live stream, you can see a picture of our esteemed host, Bob Klitzkie, shaking hands with Jeff Pleadwell, the owner and pirate of Jeff's Pirates Cove. Jeff's Pirates Cove brings us systemic racism, and it's located in Ipan Talafofo. It is an open-air restaurant dining room with breakfast, lunch, and dinner being served. We also have a bar and a gift shop. Jeff's Pirates Club is a great destination and brings to us systemic racism today. All right. Let me figure out my clicks here. This just came over by, I lost it already. This came over on Fox News today. Where did I put it? Here we go. Morgan Freeman had an interview in the Variety. It's a Hollywood-type publication. And he was interviewed for a new movie that he has coming out. But this is just a little summary of that interview, plus a little bit more behind it. The Academy Award winner said on Black History Month, "This whole idea makes my teeth itch. It's not right." Actor Morgan Freeman once again criticized the idea of a Black History Month. "I detest it," the 87-year-old actor told Variety on Saturday. "The mere idea of it. You're going to give me the shortest month in a year, and you're going to celebrate, quote, my history? This whole idea makes my teeth itch. It's not right." Freeman added, "My history is American history. It's the one thing in this world I'm interested in beyond making money, having a good time, and getting enough sleep." Freeman stressed the value of knowing American history. He related it to his upcoming film, The Gray House, which is based on the true story of 3 women who worked as Union spies during the Civil War. Freeman serves as the executive producer for the film. "If you don't know your past, if you don't remember it, you are bound to repeat it," he said. The Academy Award-winning actor made similar statements about Black History Month. In 2023, he referred to Black History Month as an insult, along with the term African American. "I don't subscribe to that title," Freeman said. "Black people have had titles all the way back to the N-word, and I do not know how these things get such a grip, but everyone uses African American. What does it really mean?" he added. Morgan Freeman has attacked Black History Month since 2005. Most notably, Freeman made national news in 2005 when he called the idea of a month dedicated to Black history ridiculous. "I don't want a Black History Month. Black history is American history," Freeman said. He added that the best way to get rid of racism is to stop talking about it. "I'm going to stop calling you a white man, and I'm going to ask you to stop calling me a black man," Freeman told the interviewer. In his decades-long career, Freeman has earned 5 Academy Award nominations and 1 win for the film Million Dollar Baby. He also earned a Kennedy Center honor in 2008 and the Cecil B. DeMille Award, the Golden Globes Lifetime Achievement Award in 2012. Morgan Freeman has argued that the best way to get rid of racism is to stop talking about it. And that is the truth versus the narrative. Everyone knows that everyone who has that really dark melanin, their skin pigment, is an African American.
Unless they're from Australia or New Guinea or
anywhere else.
Or anywhere else.
But it's
it
automatic.
Makes a lot of sense. If everyone would stop referring to race, in the United States, would stop referring to race as a qualifier for other citizens,
You're gonna get
then
canceled.
those who continue to use race as a qualifier in the public space will be seen as racist.
Well, that's the thing that is the irony, I think, of this whole thing. It's called racialism. And we can't get away from it right now because, and I want to say Obama had a lot to do with it because of the divisions he put in to place, especially in a lot of his policies. But
or the outcome of the election that elected him.
Yeah,
being a reflection of the popular will.
It was. And what's interesting is that we haven't learned to stop looking at color. And then the only way that the left or some of these liberal or far left people want to continue to apply equality or equity is to continue to see color. And it's almost like it's
like affirmative action.
Well, kind of like like affirmative action. You know, it's also like if you're not recognizing, if you keep recognizing my identities or my superficial factors of myself, how are you going to reach that equity? How are you going to reach that not equity, that equality? And you have to have a sort of color blindness to understand that. What I found interesting, and this actually opened up my eyes back when I was right out of college. I had a roommate who was from Jamaica, and his family moved to Jamaica. I mean, from that island to the United States, probably when he was 12 years old. And he kept being not forced, but told that he ought to identify as an African American. And he also used to chide some people, because we used to work in a kitchen together in the back before I moved up into the front of the house, or in the big time. But some of the workers would say, hey, and I'm just going to use a fake name here because he's probably listening. He goes, hey, Dave, how come you're never talking with us and fighting with us whenever we're talking about Black History Month and everything else? You know, you got to stand with the brothers here. You know, us African Americans need to stick together. And he, even though he came when he was 12, he had acclimated to the English language that you couldn't get an accent out of him. He spoke patois and the accent very well with his family. I remember when they come around, his older brothers would come around, but you would never know that he grew up, or he was born and raised in Jamaica and moved here, unless you were around his family. And he goes, why do you keep asking me? I told you I'm from Jamaica. I don't know your history. I have nothing to do with it. And everybody that was asking him was dumbfounded, almost like, what do you mean? You're the same color as we are. And it was like they didn't understand that people have different experiences. Not everybody was the same just because they looked the same. And it was an interesting thing. And I looked at it, and I just come out of college. I had campaigned for Clinton at my university. I was one of those star-eyed Democrats who only saw what CNN was telling me at the time. So it was was it CNN at the time? I don't think I watched CNN at the time. I think it was just regular television, regular network television. But it was very interesting how that opened my eyes to, like, whoa, I never thought of it that way. Because everybody who was Black had to be African American. And if they're African American, they are all, they're all considered down and out, all considered to be less experiences. They didn't have the opportunities. It was absolutely profiling, but it was not my intention to do it in a bad way. But he was pointing out that, look, quit profiling me, quit doing this to me. And it's not to say that he didn't experience prejudice. I don't think anyone his color, even my color skin, I absolutely experienced a weirdness when I was in college. I was awakened to it when I was in college, but it's not the person committing it to you. It's how you react to it, how you overcome it, I think, is the best way to do it, instead of sitting and griping and complaining and protesting and telling people that you're weak and you demand more stuff from them in order to verify and to confirm your greatness in the world. I don't need somebody else to do that for me. And my friend, quote, Dave, was telling the people who are supposed to be his people that he doesn't need to be complaining or protesting to verify or confirm who he was. And I was really grateful for that. Okay, let's move on before I start rambling even more. The open government law is instituted so that we have transparency in our government, so we know what's going on, because it is our tax dollars that run it. They are public servants, those who work in the government. They are not slaves, but they work for us in the sense that that service is for the public, and it's not for as an investment to make a profit of, and for people to get rich off. People who get rich off of government have manipulated the government, and I don't look too kindly on people who capitalize on making profits and gaining profane salaries just for the fact that they're a government worker. But I'm not disparaging it. However, I want to make it clear that this open government law is very important. Public Law 3634 was an incredible amendment in which it allowed the open government law to enter the digital world, so to speak, and also to make you couldn't be any more open than making sure that agendas were very detailed and they were published in the newspaper for the public to see, and also to have a link to a way for people to view these meetings online when they couldn't attend the meetings themselves. It's extremely open because now there's a record of the meeting. Now, when we look at a newspaper of general circulation, which is the mandate for publishing an agenda in the newspaper, it only includes for Guam the Guam Daily Post, because the other publication that we are familiar with, the Pacific Daily News, no longer prints a physical version of their newspaper. It is purely digital. And so any agency or department that prints an agenda in the Pacific Daily News is violating the open government law, which includes GURA, who published their first announcement of their Tuesday, June 18th meeting in the Pacific Daily News. And then their second announcement here is again published in the Pacific Daily News. Anything that is discussed in that meeting is an absolute violation of the open government law, and this meeting can be voided, nullified because of that. I'm moving on to agendas that were published in the Guam Daily Post, specifically today, but have minor violations, not minor violations, the violations of the open government law that could also render their meetings null and void. Here we have, Guam Regional Transit Authority has the notice of public meeting for Friday, June 21st at 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. We know that this agency department has been wrought with controversy and issues, and they just added another one to their list because this notice of public meeting is void of an agenda. So why are you having this meeting? Is there a reason for it? Or is it just to have it, people show up, and then you adjourn? And if even that was the matter, that's what you have to put in the agenda. You're opening, you're closing, and then you're done. But there is no agenda listed in this Guam Regional Transit Authority. Why are you having a meeting on Friday, June 21st? Thanks for the notice. Don't know why you have a notice. Guam Cancer Trust Fund. Today's agenda for a meeting on Thursday, June 20th is extremely bare bone and not detailed. You have a list of items in the agenda, and that's it, but nothing else. Item number 4, old business, nothing put afterwards. Item number 5, new business, nothing put afterwards. You have to be detailed. You have to tell the public what it is you're going to be discussing at the meeting. Otherwise, it's just an open meeting. Anything goes, and that is not allowed according to the open government law and the way your meeting has to go. You have to tell the public what you're going to be discussing. Guam Cancer Trust Fund, you are consistent violators, and I hope nothing important has been passed in your meetings, because if anybody has a discrepancy, almost all your meetings since this open law or this open government law mandates have been going on could be null and voided. Now, the Southern Soil and Water Conservation District also has an agenda published in the Guam Daily Post. It is very good until it comes up to executive session, item number 9. You don't have to go into extreme detail of what's going to be discussed in the executive session, but a general idea of the content or what's going to happen in that executive session ought to be placed in here, because there also could be a violation here. All you have is executive session, and it's blank for the rest of it. This is a public service announcement for everybody that is working in agencies of Guam and departments. Transparency is the key. There ought to be nothing hidden from the public. You do not have a right to make decisions on your own absent the public's purview, because that's what the open government law says. Period. All right. We're going to go to James Moylan versus reality. Tall Tales has determined that our representative, our delegate to the United States Congress may be well in over his head. He might be pushing a lot of things right now, but one of the biggest things that he supported and was an advocate for was to have the Department of Justice disparage the insular cases. And when he signed his name to that letter, it was a big story in a couple of publications, including National News. And then when it hit national news, about a month later, the Department of Justice did rebuke the insular cases, and we have not heard from Delegate Moylan since commenting on it. We have a lot of people who have commented on it. However, Delegate Moylan has not. It's been 13 days of silence from Delegate Moylan since the Department of Justice rebuked the insular cases. What was interesting is that there was commentary from Grijalva, Plaskett, Dick Durbin, Jerry Gonads Nadler. There was also commentary from AOC and someone who wasn't even a part of this Department of Justice letter, the Vice Speaker, Tina Munoz Barnes. However, Delegate Moylan has not made any comment, and it was a pretty big deal that he put his name to this letter. Why do you think this is a big deal for James Moylan to put his name to a letter such as this and then not speak to it later on? What say you, Bob? Okay. We're going to go to break, and when we come back, we'll have more Tall Tales after this. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Off a day, Mark Beneventi from Security Title here with a little information about deeds. In the world of real estate, a deed is the most common way to transfer property and ownership. Whether you're transferring a house in Jigo, a hotel in Tumon, or a ranch in Talipopo, the deed will describe the property boundaries, any restrictions, and the exact name of the new owner. Whether you're selling, buying, or even inheriting property, the deed transferring title is essential. When it comes to real estate, knowledge is key. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
We now return to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, soaring over the confusion with his superpowers of truth. Call 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
And we're back here on Tall Tales. When we left for the break, we were talking about Delegate Moylan, Representative James Moylan, and his strange silence for not commenting on, I guess, a successful letter that he signed and was an advocate of having the Department of Justice rebuke the insular cases. We have heard many times before why that is a bad idea and don't understand why we have not had an explanation yet of why James Moylan wanted to have us, the people of Guam, to pay for federal taxes, to stop receiving Section 30 money. All that can happen when the insular cases are done away with. As well as we're included into the uniformity clause, in which we would be treated the same as all other territories and the way states are. Wouldn't you agree, Bob?
I certainly agree. And Jim has just shown us through our vote. And, watching his performance, watching Michael St. Nicholas's, and then zeroing in on the other challenger, Ginger Cruz, I think there's only one way to go on this, and that's Ginger Cruz. Although, as I mentioned on Friday, it puts me kind of on the horns of a dilemma. I support Republicans. I'm a conservative, but I can't support idiocy, and that's what Jim is engaged in here. Right off the bat, signing up with Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, that ought to kind of give you a tip that this isn't where you belong, Jim. This is not your place. And I would call anyone's attention to who's ever interested to a recent article in the Post where Ginger laid out her platform. And, I hope Daryl's ready back there with that dog that he keeps back there in the control room. Because in addition to what Ginger said, it's also important to notice to what she didn't say. And one of the things she didn't do, she didn't get into the grievance politics that seem to be so popular with our politicians. So this, for 300 years, the Chamorros have never had the right to self-determination, and the federal government is always screwing us over, and all of that kind of stuff. And she didn't get into the identity politics either, leading one to believe that it didn't really make much difference what race or ethnicity he was. She would provide the best representation that she could for that person. I don't get that feeling from St. Nicholas or Jim, not so bad. But people that have run for it before, Judy Wonpat, as an example, only wanted Chamorros to vote in the so-called plebiscite. So it's refreshing to see that. So Ginger has come out here, and she has, I think a 5-point platform, expanding protection of the Guam community, and not just for the military. You notice she uses the connecting conduction rather than the contrasting conduction. She uses and, not but, which I think is really important. Second point, using Guam's unincorporated status as a bargaining chip to create unique solutions to issues. Next item, increasing Guam's involvement in regional trade, commerce, and defense agreements between the U.S. and its allies will allow Guam to reap the benefits of increasing Indo-Pacific prosperity. And finally, learning the development of a shared vision of the island called Guam 2044, a path to empowerment. So this is not the usual, I'm running for office because I want to help the people. And, Guam has a unique culture that I'm going, the old, really tired cliches that we get from the other politicians, including Jim. There's nothing imaginative about Jim Moylan. Going on into what she told the Post, she said that she had to elevate Guam in the federal system. And she said, right now we're under the purview of the Department of Interior. Now, what that means, we're not under the control of the Department of Interior. The Department of Interior is that part of the national government that has programmatic responsibility for the territories and freely associated states. And in a sense, the Department of Interior is our advocate to cut through the bureaucracy of the national capital. But Puerto Rico has representation in the office of the president. And that's what Ginger wants to shoot for. She wants us to be not to be with Interior, but in the office of the president. And we really got a very good argument for that. Puerto Rico's argument, of course, is that it's so much bigger, developed, so much more ready for statehood than the other 4 territories. But ours is we're on the forward edge of the battle area. You know, you can't discuss Guam's offensive or defensive posture in the Indo-Pacific theater. The first word that you're going to use is Guam. So it makes sense that the president takes us under his wings instead of the Department of Interior, which has no defense capability. She goes on near the end of the article and talks about the 903 Committee. The covenant between the Northern Marianas and Guam establishes this 903 Committee, which either party can call with high-powered representatives to sit down and try to iron out some of the things that, some of the disconnects between the Northern Marianas and the national government. We could, I suspect we could have the same thing if we asked for it. You know when we asked for it, Jose?
Let me guess.
Never.
Yep.
We've never asked for it, and I've never seen any of our Washington representatives even refer to the covenant. Now, you can go to the covenant, it's online, and there's some really good stuff in there. And, you know, once again, we've got a really good argument. You gave it to them, you got to give it to us. And then there's that whole book about the secret Guam study. That's really kind of a blueprint about how to go about doing that. So, you know, Ginger's not a Republican. She's a Democrat. But she's thinking her way through this instead of stumbling forward, doing the same thing we've always done before and gotten the same results we didn't get before. So I started out talking about Jim, but Jim, you still got a chance, but you need to come out and you need to tell us why you went along with Grijalva's resolution to try to persuade the Department of Justice to turn its back on the Insular cases and to denigrate the Insular cases when, in actual fact, the Insular cases, specifically Downs versus Bidwell, is the best and only advantage we have right now.
Absolutely. And that's a lot of people are going to say, well, you did say that she is not a Republican, she's Democrat, and you did say that she is probably not in the same mindset with a lot of things, but platforms are created and have a stance on. But I want to say that the Insular cases is the one support beam that nobody thinks about. When you remove that, the rest of the platform falls apart. And I think that's a key thing that we're missing here. Thank you very much, Bob. Very much.
You're welcome, Jose.
All right. We're going to go to we're not going to go to break. We're going to go to the next thing on the card here, Maneka versus Israel. Now, if you recall, Maneka is a protester, an anti-militarist, a member of Protehi Letekin, and was in front of the legislature, inside the legislature, also protesting when a number of senators were attempting to pass a resolution to support Israel and disavow anything Hamas because of the October 7th terrorist attack Hamas had on Israel, where they killed innocent women, children, elderly, babies even, non-combatants, and took several of them hostage, including several U.S. citizens. Recently, the IDF did a rescue plan, or rescue on for those, and were able to recover 4 of those hostages. This came out from the Free Press, written by a reporter named Olivia Rangold. I went to cover a protest. I was surrounded by a mob. Last night, I went to New York City's Union Square to cover a rally against the massacre in the Nuseirat camp regions of Gaza. That's what pro-Palestinian protesters are calling the operation that freed 4 Israeli hostages and killed at least 100 Palestinians, a mix of Hamas combatants and civilians caught in the chaos as Hamas fired RPGs at the hostages. All around the country, similar anti-Israel protests sprung up to rouse those furious at the hostage rescue operation. I've been at this particular protest in Union Square for about 45 minutes, watching and taking notes when a man wearing a neck gaiter, sunglasses, and a Hezbollah flag fashioned as a headscarf suddenly pointed at me. "She's a Zionist," he shouted. "Get her out of here." Immediately, dozens of protesters swarmed me, hoisting their keffeyehs high in the sky and boxing me in to block my view. Many of them were completely shrouded in keffeyehs and masks. A chorus of voices surrounded me, shoving me. "Get the F out," a woman yelled into my ear. "The people are saying we don't want you here." A man holding a sign that declared, "Long live October 7th," shouted over the crowd, "Get in her face, make her leave." One man fired an air horn in my ears. A girl lurched at my notebook, grabbing it and ripping apart the metal spine. "You're not writing anything down," she said, tearing the pages and throwing them into the air. "Get the F out. Get the F out." In the context of these protests across the country this week, this was very mild. For anyone visibly Jewish who happens to be near one of these mobs, or anyone like a security guard trying to keep peace, the interactions are often much more harrowing. Here are a few data points of the escalation over the last 24 hours. Yesterday at UCLA, a crowd of pro-Palestinian protesters, most with makeshift shields, swarmed a security guard. As he tried to flee, one smacked him over the head with a smartphone, causing him to bleed. Later that night on campus, a masked protester berated UCLA Shabab Rabbi Dovid Gurevich, calling him a pedophile rabbi, adding that, quote, "Israel is full of pedophiles." When Gurevich asked why he wouldn't reveal his face, the man replied, "If I show my face, I'll have to effing kill you." Other protesters shouted at the rabbi and others, "Go back to Poland or Ukraine. Go back to Europe. And death to effing Zionism." 25 of those protesters were arrested. More scenes were captured on video in Union Square in New York. One man yelled at a small crowd that had come out to support Israel, "I wish Hitler was still here. He would have wiped you all out." And that's actual audio that was recorded and has been playing on a number of news stations. It's not just hearsay. On Wall Street, the protest mob chanted, "Israel, go to hell," outside an exhibition memorializing the Nova Music Festival, where Hamas murdered 364 innocents. As the crowd took its citywide day of rage for Gaza downtown via the subway, one protester proclaimed on the train, "Raise your hands if you're a Zionist. This is your chance to get out." Another recorded audio that's been played many times, and it's unbelievable that this stuff gets unchecked in the manner it does, yet we have a lot of false stories of things that are being said from the other side. I'm going to get back to this article. Anti-Israel protesters who had been marching regularly in major cities across the world ever since Hamas invaded Israel on October 7th, killing more than 12,000 civilians, claim they are for peace. And yet they find creative ways to justify the violence of Hamas. I've been to 18 of these protests so far, and it's not unusual to spot the symbols of terrorist groups Hamas and Hezbollah, even Nazi swastikas. Many believe the protests would die out once college students had dismantled their encampments and gone home for the summer. But instead, with the heat of summer, protesters have spilled into the streets and become even more brazen and inconfident in what they are saying out loud. To be clear, I was in a public park doing my job as a journalist, simply trying to document the movement as it is, when a mob prevented me from doing so, threatening violence and grabbing my things. I filed a police report for harassment. The protesters have a right to march. They have a right to scream vile things. And we have a right to watch, to listen, and to report on what they're saying. That's the deal you make when you host a rally on a public sidewalk in America or take over the quad of a public university. You cannot demand that only comrades be allowed to see what you're doing. I'm just going to write down your quotes as they really are. I tried to reason with the protesters last night. I want to speak with you. Will you speak with me? Free Palestine, one girl replied, flipping me off. I'm just grateful that that kind of rhetoric hasn't, well, not rhetoric, that kind of activity hasn't graced our shores here on Guam. And the more we talk about how horrendous it is, I hope the more people have cooler heads and decide not to bring this narrative to our island. We're going to go to a break. You're listening to Tall Tales here on KUSG. We'll be right back. Going to the home stretch. Don't go away.
BK Melt are back at Burger King. Our new Philly Melt is topped with warm peppers and onions, melty Swiss cheese, and royal sauce on a toasted bun. Also available the classic with caramelized onions and stacker sauce. Top off your meal with our new mozzarella fries, refreshing Coca-Cola, and our birthday pie. Available for a limited time only. BK Tumon Bay, Agutnia, Micronesia Mall, and the airport. Thank you for 35 years. You rule.
So, tunay na kaibigan na handa para sa inyo. Ang bangko ng kinabukasan, laging maaasahan. Pan Pacific, where others the branches we place through.
All right, that's the home stretch, Churchill Downs. Just a few more moments before we end this episode of Tall Tales, a shortened version because we have a special version of Veterans with Benefits hosted by Anthony Tehran, and Karina Ballista. Coming up next, a very special guest is going to be coming in, and I want you guys to come and see this. This is a very important guest coming in as well. We're going to go to the card and go straight to SCOTUS versus the 45. And this may sound like a Second Amendment piece, but it's actually 45 refers to Donald Trump, right? Was the 45th president? Did I get that wrong? 45, 46, 47. I can't remember now. Anyways, Supreme Court versus President Trump from his term. Why should Congress ever take a vote? Oh, this is titled Supreme Court's Welcome Bump Stock Ruling. Why should Congress ever take a vote if lawmakers can simply defer hard policy choices to the regulatory state? That is the subtext of the Supreme Court's Welcome 6-3 ruling Friday on bump stocks, which are rifle accessories that facilitate rapid firing. Regulating bump stocks may be a reasonable policy, but it's up to Congress. The opinion in Garland versus Cargill, written by Justice Clarence Thomas, is a straightforward case of statutory interpretation. Federal law strictly regulates machine guns, but it defines them as weapons that automatically fire multiple rounds by a single function of the trigger. A bump stock does not do that. As the majority explains, it's a plastic casing that allows every other part of the rifle to slide back and forth. This helps a user to quickly and repeatedly bump the gun's trigger forward against the stationary finger. The mechanics matter, Justice Thomas writes, because the statutory definition of a machine gun hinges on how many shots discharge when the shooter engages the trigger. A semi-automatic rifle fires one shot per trigger pull, bump stock or no. Writing in dissent for the three liberals, Justice Sonia Sotomayor says that when the law refers to a single function of the trigger, it really means a single action by the shooter to initiate a firing sequence. She uses that logic to try to erase distinctions. Just as the shooter of an M16 need only pull the trigger and maintain backward pressure on the trigger, a shooter of the bump stock equipped AR-15 need only the trigger and maintain forward pressure on the gun. That's not true. This is unconvincing, and the obvious difference is the latter trigger operates once per shot. Her best argument is that the Bureau of Alcohol and Firearms, the ATF, has sometimes considered other gun tinkerings to be machine guns, including when a man attached a motorized fishing reel to a firearm so its rotations would pull the trigger. But Justice Thomas says the ATF on more than 10 separate occasions acknowledged that bump stocks did not qualify as machine guns. In 2018, the agency estimated that there could be up to 520,000 of them in circulation. The ATF does not get to turn something like 500,000 Americans into potential felons without any say-so from Congress. By the way, the bump stock diktat wasn't a Biden administration regulation. The ATF moved during the Trump administration after the Las Vegas mass shooter used a bump stock in 2017. That's still debated. The Trump administration approved of this. In doing so, it let Congress off the hook, as Justice Samuel Alito points out in a concurrence. There is a simple remedy for the disparate treatment of bump stocks and machine guns, he says. Congress can amend the law and perhaps would have done so already if the ATF had stuck with its earlier interpretation. Now that the situation is clear, Congress can act. This is an especially important message in an era where regulators in both parties have decided they can rewrite laws regardless of the plain language of a statute. In this and other cases, the Supreme Court has been saying loud and clear that regulators can't exceed their authority and that Congress needs to get back to the business of debating and writing laws rather than ducking difficult votes in favor of the administrative state. I applaud this decision, not because it protected bump stocks, but because it protected the rule of law and our separation of powers in our government. It is supposed to be Congress, the U.S. House of Representatives, and the Senate to enact laws. And we keep going into, this is a common theme that the Supreme Court is doing, is trying to weed out not just regulatory abuses, but also the critarchy that we've seen in other courts, where the courts determine if they see something they like or don't like, they're going to act on it when it ought to be our representatives, our lawmakers in our system. If you agree or disagree, 888-8255, 888-TALK. Again, this was during the Trump administration, so it'll be interesting to hear his former President Trump's opinion on how people are saying his Supreme Court overruled him, and that would be the rhetoric of a lot of people in the left. You're going to see a lot of that in the news also, the same way that they didn't celebrate the fact that it was a unanimous decision on the abortion pill ruling, which I agreed with as well. There was no standing for those who brought the case, and thus that's the reason why the SCOTUS ruled against the plaintiffs, the plaintiffs in the case. We're going now to Biden's EPA versus border security. This is just a quick opinion that came out of Wall Street Journal, and it's very concerning. We have just a few more minutes left until we get to Veterans with Benefits next, and our salutations to our president. Look who's funding the EPA. Look who the EPA is funding now. The Inflation Reduction Act is the political gift that keeps on giving, especially if you're a lobby for progressive causes. We recently told you that the Environmental Protection Agency handed IRA money to an outfit backing anti-Israel protests. Turns out the EPA is also funding groups that oppose immigration enforcement. That's the latest discovery by West Virginia Senator Shelley Moore Capito's office, which is probing IRA spending. The law appropriated $3 billion for environmental and climate justice block grants. The EPA is supposed to select grant makers and partner organizations to spread around the largest. The EPA tapped Fordham University as a grant maker to distribute $50 million in collaboration with the New York Immigration Coalition and the New Jersey Alliance for Immigrant Justice. What does immigration have to do with climate? Nothing, though progressives say the issue intersect in the oppression of minority groups. According to the EPA, Fordham and its partners will take an intersectional approach to place frontline communities in positions of power to advance climate justice in disadvantaged and hard-to-reach communities and communities disproportionately impacted by climate change, pollution, and other environmental stressors. What the heck does that even mean? We're going to get back to it more so tomorrow, including a lot of good local stories like Doug versus the Supreme Court of Guam, and a part 2 on Perez versus Duenas, Bill 175 controversy. Right now, we're going to say goodbye to our president in the best way we can.
Not yet.
Yes, we're going to do it now.
You really want to say it now?
I want to say it all the time.
Yeah.
And I wish I can say it at a voting booth, but unfortunately, Guam only has a straw poll that we send to the states. And even though Guam did, I guess, send Biden to the White House.
And we send delegates to both
we send delegates,
conventions.
Right? But, okay, when do you want to say it? In a few minutes? A few seconds? You just don't want to say goodbye to him. You just don't want to say goodbye at all day. I understand. I don't want to say goodbye to Tom
I'd like to stay here for another hour, but we got a really good show coming up.
Yes, we do. Absolutely. Don't forget, coming up next, Veterans with Benefits, a very special 2-hour episode. Right now, we're going to greet our president with Let's Go, Brandon.